The No True Scotsman fallacy. This fallacy, which is frequently used to defend assertions that rely on universal generalizations, such as all marketers love pie, incorrectly deflects counterexamples to a claim by modifying the original claim's position or criteria to exclude the counterexample. In other words, rather than admitting that a counterexample to their initial claim exists, the speaker changes the wording of the claim. Ad hominem fallacy. The ad hominem fallacy is one that seeks to undermine an opponent's position by mentioning a personal trait or fact about the opponent rather than using reasoning. For example, Catherine is an unsuitable candidate for mayor because she did not grow up in this community. Red herring fallacy. A red herring is an attempt to divert attention from the current topic by bringing an irrelevant point. For example, losing a tooth might be frightening, but have you heard of the tooth fairy? Straw man fallacy. A straw man argument opposes a hyperbolic, inaccurate version of the adversary, rather than their genuine argument. For example, Aaron believes that in order to save the planet from climate change, we must stop using all plastics immediately. Personal incredulity fallacy. If you don't understand how or why something is true, it doesn't necessarily indicate it's wrong. A single or collective lack of understanding is insufficient to render a claim invalid. For example, it's unclear how redesigning our website led to increased conversions, implying that another element was involved. Equivocation fallacy. An equivocation is a remark that is intended to mislead or confuse readers or listeners by employing different meanings or interpretations of a term, or by simply using ambiguous phrasing. For example, although I have a detailed budget for the campus that accounts for every dollar spent, my opponent merely wants to spend money on special interest programs. Slippery slope fallacy. A slippery slope fallacy occurs when an arguer believes that a specific set of events will follow a single beginning point, despite the lack of supporting evidence. For example, if we create an exception for Beagel's service dog, other people will want to bring their own dogs. Then everyone will bring their dog, and before you know it, our restaurant will be swamped with dogs, drool, fur, and all the noise they produce, and no one will want to eat here anymore. The fallacy fallacy. Making a fallacy-ridden claim does not inherently invalidate the argument's premise. Rather, it indicates that the argument does not genuinely validate its premise. In other words, their argument is bad, but they are not necessarily wrong. For example, John's argument in favor of redesigning the company website clearly relied heavily on cherry-picked statistics in support of his claim, so Lola decided that redesigning the website would not be a good decision. Hasty Generalization fallacy. A hasty generalization is a remark made after considering only one or a few examples, rather than conducting more extensive study to support the claim. It's vital to remember that what constitutes appropriate study is determined by the problem at hand, and the statement being made about it. For example, I felt sick both times I ate Giorgio's pizza, indicating that I am allergic to something in the pizza. The accident fallacy. An accident fallacy occurs when a general rule is applied to a specific instance that it doesn't properly address. For example, you should pay off your student loans quickly because being in debt is bad, without regard for the individual's salary or other financial responsibilities. Begging the question fallacy. A begging the question fallacy arises when the argument's conclusion is assumed in the premise. In other words, it's a type of circular reasoning in which the proposition you're attempting to prove is already considered to be true. For example, when the girl questions her father about who made him the boss, he says, "I'm in charge because what I say goes." Texas Sharpshooter fallacy. This fallacy derives its colorful name from a story about a Texan who shoots his gun at a barn wall and then paints a target around the nearest cluster of bullet holes. He then points to the bullet-ridden target as proof of his exceptional marksmanship. Speakers who use the Texas Sharpshooter fallacy tend to cherry-pick data clusters depending on a planned outcome. Instead of allowing a complete range of facts to guide them to a reasonable conclusion, they look for patterns and correlations that support their goals while ignoring evidence that contradicts them or implies the clusters were not statistically significant. For instance, Lisa sold her first startup to an influential tech company, so she must be a successful entrepreneur. She ignores the fact that 4 of her startups have failed since then. The Middel Ground fallacy. This fallacy assumes that a compromise between 2 extreme opposing viewpoints is always valid. Arguments of this kind deny the possibility that one or both extremes are totally true or incorrect, rendering any compromise between the two worthless as well. For example, Lola suggests redesigning the company website to increase conversions, while John strongly opposes this approach. As a result, the ideal strategy is to rebuild some sections of the website. Slothful Induction fallacy. Slothful induction is the exact opposite of the previous Hasty Generalization fallacy. This fallacy arises when there is sufficient logical evidence to support a given conclusion, but someone refuses to admit it, instead attributing the outcome to coincidence or something completely unrelated. For instance, while all of Brad's projects in the past 2 years have fallen behind schedule, this may be attributed to unforeseen circumstances, rather than his project management abilities. Appeals to authority. In an appeal to authority, the arguer uses an authoritative figure's expertise to back up a point, even if that expertise is irrelevant or exaggerated. For example, if you want to be healthier, you should avoid drinking coffee. I read it on a fitness blog. Anecdotal Evidence fallacy. Instead of logical evidence, this error uses instances from someone's own experience. Arguments that rely largely on anecdotal evidence sometimes disregard the fact that a single case cannot serve as solid support for a larger claim. For instance, updating all landing page text to bright red resulted in a double conversion rate for one of our clients. As a result, replacing all text with red has been shown to increase conversions by double. Naturalistic fallacy. A naturalistic fallacy, also known as the appeal to nature fallacy, leads to an incorrect conclusion by presuming that everything in nature is moral and correct. False dilemma fallacy. A false dilemma, also known as a false dichotomy, states that there are only 2 solutions in a given scenario. Often these 2 possibilities oppose one another, with people failing to recognize the existence of other, more reasonable options. For example, if you don't agree with my decision, you're not truly my friend. Bandwagon fallacy. The bandwagon fallacy asserts that a particular behavior is correct just because it is popular. For example, it is quite acceptable to draft your paper at the last minute. Everyone does it. Appeal to ignorance. An appeal to ignorance asserts that something must be true since it has not been proven untrue. It can also be a declaration that something is false since it has yet to be proven true. This is also known as the burden of proof fallacy. For example, nobody has ever demonstrated that there are no fairies living in our attic, so there must be. Circular argument. A circular argument uses the same statement for both the premise and the conclusion. No new information or justification is presented. Example: peppers are the easiest vegetable to grow because I think peppers are the easiest vegetable to grow. Sunk cost fallacy. The sunk cost fallacy occurs when an arguer justifies their decision to continue a given course of action based on the amount of time or money they've already invested in it. For example, I'm not liking this book, yet I bought it and need to finish it. Appeal to pity. An appeal to pity seeks to influence a reader's or listener's opinion by provoking them emotionally. For example, I knew I should have arrived on time for the interview, but I woke up late and felt terrible about it, and the stress of being late made it difficult to focus on driving here. Causal fallacy. A causal fallacy is one in which a relationship between 2 things is implied, but cannot be proven. For example, when ice cream sales are up, so are shark attacks. Therefore, buying ice cream increases your risk of being bitten by a shark. Appeal to hypocrisy. An appeal to hypocrisy, also known as a tu quoque fallacy, is an argument that uses reactive criticism instead of addressing the claim itself. Such as, you don't have enough experience to be the new leader, neither do you.